In this Map Suite MVC Edition sample app walkthrough, we're going to show you how you can bind your own custom data to the map at runtime and render it accordingly on the map. So this can be very useful. Say for example you have some sales data for a given country and you want to be able to add that to the map and color the country if it's had a lot of sales, or color it differently if it hasn't had very many, or even label it a little bit differently based upon a sales number or things of that nature. Well, you're not going to have that sales data in your shapefile, but you may have the country ID in both your database that has your sales data or the country name, and you want to join that with the shape or the feature layer at the map at runtime to give a real-time representation of that data on the map. So this sample shows you how to do this, and it's a very simplistic sample. So you'll have to write your code to tie in your custom data source, but this will give you a good idea of how to do that. So let's dig right in and take a look at this. In this case here we've got two countries, the United States and China, where if it's those types of features we want to go ahead and display the country ID associated with them. Because we don't have an outside database or data source with the how do I samples, we're just going to repeat the ID to show the concept of how custom data can be added to a feature at runtime and labeled accordingly. So let's dig right in here to the view source. Actually, the view source doesn't have any code. In this case, it's all in the controller source. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new map, set our background color, our code extent, decimal degree, and add the world map kit overlay. So that's pretty standard stuff with pretty much all of our samples, so I won't spend much time there. And then we've got our shapefile layer that we want to add to the map. In this case, it's country 02, which contains the boundaries of all the countries in the world. And we're going to go ahead and set a style on that with the transparent fill and a slight green color for the background or for the border, so we can see accordingly. And then we're going to create a text style, and we're going to label this text style. So we want to label some of these features, and we're going to base it on a column named test. So this is actually the custom column we're going to add to the shapefile at runtime, and we're going to label any data that we stick in there with Arial, a size of 10, and then a color of red. So this is really part of where we're going to define our custom column and where we bind that in. Now this one only is doing one column, but if you had multiple things, you can add as many columns as you'd like. Finally, down here we're just saying we want to apply that style for all 20 zoom levels, and then we want to give a little drawing margin percentage. So if our label here goes over one tile, it'll not get cut off. Alright, the next thing we need to do is hook up our event handler for our custom column fetch. And that's where most of the magic is happening, because whenever we go to render a country from this shapefile, we want this event handler to be called so we can populate it with the correct data, our custom data that we have in some other data source, such as our sales data. And so in order to wire that up, we do this line of code right here, and we tell it anytime that custom column fetch is executed, we want to call this feature source custom column fetch, which is this routine right down here. The other thing we need to do is add to our required column names collection test. So just because we've set it here doesn't mean that the layer knows about our custom column. We also need to register it by adding it to the required column names collection, and that way the map control will raise our custom column of fetch event when test needs to be accessed. So after we have all that set up, we go ahead and just add that layer to our map and our overlays and render that out accordingly. So when the map goes to load in this case, each time a country gets drawn, this custom column fetch is going to be called so we can populate the test column with whatever data we want. So in here, we're just doing a real simple if statement to check if our ID is 135 or 47, and that equates to either the United States or China. And then when that happens, we want to set that column value for test equal to country ID equals the ID. Now in the real world, you wouldn't probably want to do this because you don't probably care about the ID too much, but you'd want to maybe fetch your sales data or do other or some other data that's important to you. So if you don't have the ID reference basically of what's in the shapefile or anything to match to your table. So typically you'd have to match either on name or FIPS code or like a zip code or something along like that, to where it's both in your custom data set and also in the shapefile. And probably the ID is not going to be one of those things. In that case, you have access to the entire shapefile feature layer here through this sender that gets passed in this custom column fetch. And you can do various queries and get the actual column value name. So if you wanted to, you could say, query data by ID, pass in 135, and you get the string back United States. And then you could query your database to find the sales data for United States and populate that column value with what's returned from your database accordingly. So I hope that gives you a good idea of how this works. I know it's a little tricky at first, but it's a very powerful concept that allows you to join your custom data to the map at runtime and produce some really neat looking maps. So I hope this sample app walkthrough has been helpful. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact us, or you can post your questions directly on our discussion forums at thinkgeo.com/forums. Thank you for watching.